They didn't come when you were strong, when your voice carried fire and your eyes held storms. They kept their distance. They clapped from the shadows, smiled with hollow teeth, and said they were proud, because they knew they couldn't touch you then. No, they waited for the noise of your victories to die down, waited for your shoulders to drop, for your heart to break, for your faith in people to tremble. They timed your storms like a hunter times the night, because weakness to them wasn't an accident, it was an invitation. You see, when your light flickered, when your laughter grew quieter, and your confidence thinned to a whisper, that's when they returned. Not with comfort, not with kindness, but with cold hands and clever words, not to lift you, but to lean on you, not to support, but to slowly consume, because the truth is they never left. They were just waiting for the version of you they could finally control. Predators do not strike at strength, they never challenge you at your highest. They never enter the ring when your spirit is loud, your mind is sharp, and your heart is fully armored. No, they linger at the edges, watching, calculating, studying the rhythm of your resilience. Because strength, true strength, is terrifying to them. It doesn't shout, it radiates. It doesn't ask for validation, it simply is. And that kind of power makes the hidden ones uncomfortable. It exposes their intentions. It reflects their emptiness, so they retreat. They pretend they're gone. They pretend they've moved on, but they haven't. They're watching. They're waiting. Because when your soul is whole, you can't be touched. When your energy is aligned, no manipulation, no mind games, no subtle betrayal can make its way through. You are a fortress when you're strong, and they know it. That's why they wait. They don't confront you when your eyes are alive and your spirit is unshaken. They don't provoke you when you walk with purpose and your voice carries conviction. No, they wait for the moment your hands start trembling under the weight of betrayal. They wait for the crack in your tone, for the hesitation in your step, for the slight bend in your spine after one too many disappointments, because then, only then, can they step in and say, "I'm here for you." But they're not. They're here for what's left of you, here for what they can take now that you're tired of fighting. They wear masks of concern, offer half-hearted sympathy, speak in soft tones, but every word is designed to sit beneath your skin and pull your walls down. Slowly, quietly, until they can get inside the places they were never meant to reach. You didn't imagine it. You didn't overthink it. You felt it, the distance when you were winning, the silence when you were strong, and the sudden interest when life hit you hardest. That wasn't a coincidence. That was their timing. That was their moment. Because strength repels the wrong people, and weakness, though it doesn't invite them, allows them entry. You see, real threats don't always come charging in. Sometimes they wait outside your gates with flowers and soft eyes, knowing full well that pain makes you open doors you would have kept locked in your power. That is why they waited, not because they cared, not because they changed, but because they couldn't conquer you until your fire dimmed just enough for them to approach without burning. So the next time you rise, and you will remember who was missing when you roared, and who appeared when you trembled. That's how you recognize the predators, not by how loud they speak, but by how quietly they wait. Weakness does not invite attack, it permits it. They didn't come because you were weak, they came because they knew you wouldn't stop them. That's the bitter truth. Your weakness wasn't the magnet, your silence was, your hesitation, the way you doubted yourself, second, guessed your worth, softened your voice just to keep peace that never existed. That's what allowed them in, not because you were lesser, not because you didn't matter, but because in that moment you had forgotten how much you did. You see, weakness isn't about falling. Everyone falls. But staying down, not because you want to, but because you don't remember how to rise. That's the space they look for. That's the doorway, and the worst part, they don't kick it down. They don't force their way into your life. No, they wait for you to leave it open out of guilt, fear, or the aching hunger to feel seen again. And when you do, they smile, step inside, and act like they belong. They don't attack you the way enemies do. No flags, no weapons, no warning. They come cloaked in old memories, in voices you used to trust, in hands that once held yours through the darkness. They remind you of better days just enough to make you forget what they've done. And by the time you remember, they're already sitting comfortably in your peace, shifting your boundaries, rewriting yourself. Worth one tiny suggestion at a time. You're too emotional. You're not the same anymore. I'm just trying to help. These aren't words of care. They're cue signals that your silence has now become their playground. Because when you're strong, you speak up. But when you're weak, you explain. You justify. You rationalize things that should have made you walk away the first time. That's what they count on. They know that you'll forgive things you shouldn't when you're tired. That you'll accept half love when your heart is running on empty. That you'll settle for survival when you've forgotten what thriving even feels like. That's why they don't come in the beginning, they wait for the middle or the end, when you're just trying to hold yourself together, and then they appear. Not to destroy you quickly, no, they're far more patient than that. They come to dull you, to slowly quiet the parts of you that used to set fire to everything false. Until one day you wake up and don't recognize the way you shrink in their presence. But deep down, a voice remains. A flicker, a stubborn little ember, the one that still knows who you are. And when that part of you stirs, when you begin to remember your worth, your voice, your light, that's when they panic. Because they didn't come for you. They came for your silence, and when it breaks, so do they. They studied your storms they didn't guess. They knew. Every sigh, every tear, every withdrawn glance, they noticed it all. Not because they cared, but because they were studying. Observing, recording your pain like a silent observer at the edge of your collapse. They weren't offering help, they were memorizing the rhythm of your suffering. Every betrayal you suffered, every heartbreak that rattled your chest, every time life knocked the air from your lungs, they were there, not beside you, but behind the curtain, watching, calculating. Because some people don't want to destroy you. When you're strong, they want to be the ones who strike after life has already taken most of the fight out of you. They want the easy victory, the quiet invasion. And so they wait not blindly, but with deep, intentional patience. They knew when you lost your job. They noticed when your circle grew smaller. They could hear the shift in your laughter, the way it used to echo, and now barely escaped your lips. They picked up on the hesitations in your speech, the way your confidence was starting to break like thin glass. They noticed how your energy shifted from defiance to exhaustion. That's what they were waiting for. Because the ones who study your storms are the same ones who plan to walk in after the rain, not to rebuild, but to scavenge, to claim pieces of you when you no longer have the strength to say no. They watched you struggle, and instead of offering their shoulder, they took mental notes. They saw your darkest moments not as chances to protect you, but as cues for when to reappear, to reintroduce themselves, to smile again, to ask how are you, with a voice that sounds soft, but holds 1,000 knives behind its teeth. And you, because you were tired, because you were reaching for any kind of comfort, might have welcomed them. That's what makes their strategy so vile. They don't force their way in. They let your pain unlock the door. They let your need for healing soften your boundaries. They let your storms wear down your instincts until you start to believe that maybe they're not so bad after all. But make no mistake, they didn't come to soothe. They came to sift, to quietly take control of what's left. And by the time you start feeling uneasy again, by the time that inner voice rises and says, something isn't right, they've already woven themselves into your days, your mind, your choices. But here's what they didn't study: your capacity to rise, your ability to snap awake, to remember, to reclaim. And when that moment comes, and it always does, the very same ones who studied your pain will be stunned by your recovery, because they prepared for your weakness, but they never imagined your strength would return with fire in its eyes. Their patience was a strategy. They didn't disappear. They just stepped back, quietly, casually, like it didn't mean anything, like they were simply giving you space. But deep down, they never left the scene, they just moved behind it. Their absence wasn't detachment, it was calculation. It was timing, because people like that don't operate out of emotion, they operate on opportunity. They saw that you were still strong, still grounded, still guarded, so they waited, not with love, not with hope, but with precision. Their silence was never innocent. It was a chess move, one built on the belief that your pain would eventually wear you down enough for their return to feel comforting instead of dangerous. And the moment your world got quieter, the moment you were surrounded by just enough darkness, they reappeared like they'd never been gone, like they'd just missed you. But what they missed wasn't you, it was control. They were never gone, just hidden, behind texts left unanswered, behind false smiles and distant conversations. They wanted you to think they'd moved on, that they'd grown, but really they were just watching from afar, waiting for your glow to dim. Because people who thrive on your confusion don't need to force their presence, they just need to wait until you're tired enough to invite them back. And when you did, they returned with kindness dipped in manipulation, with affection that didn't feel quite right, but was still tempting enough to quiet your doubts. Their words were rehearsed, their tone soft, intentional. They knew exactly what to say to make your walls feel unnecessary. You've changed. I've been thinking about you. You mean more than you know. Phrases dressed as healing, but stitched together with hooks. You thought it was timing, fate, a second chance, but it was none of those things. It was design, because they needed you unsure. They needed you lonely. They needed just enough ache in your soul that you'd choose familiarity over safety, that you'd overlook the past just to feel something close to comfort. That's how they work, not by overpowering, but by outlasting. They don't fight your strength. They let time do it for them, and when they return, it's not with rage, but with gentleness, as if they're doing you a favor, as if they're offering closure or understanding. But the truth is they were never offering peace, only possession. But here's the part they never calculated: you were watching too. Maybe not with eyes wide open, but with a soul that never truly forgets. And somewhere in you, there was always a voice that whispered, "This is not what love looks like." And when that voice grew louder, when you finally saw through the timing and the tactics, you realized their patience was never about love. It was about control, and your awakening, that was checkmate. Your comeback is their collapse. They thought you were finished. They thought that when you broke, you would stay broken, that once your heart shattered, it wouldn't have the strength to beat the same again. They mistook your silence for surrender, your distance for defeat. But they forgot one thing: you were never fragile. You were just rebuilding, quietly, carefully, out of sight, out of their reach. Because real strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in the dark while the world believes you've vanished. And as they laughed behind closed doors, as they traded stories about your downfall like trophies, you were piecing yourself together. Not in rage, not in desperation, but in clarity, in truth. You were remembering who you were before the world tried to convince you to be less, before they tried to take your light and wear it as their own. And now your silence has ended. You see, your comeback is not loud, it's precise, it's rooted. It doesn't seek applause, and it doesn't demand revenge. It just is a presence, a force, a return of everything they tried to dim. And the moment they see it, that you've risen, that you've healed, that you're no longer reachable through guilt or pain, they crumble. Not because you struck back, but because you no longer respond. Because the version of you they were waiting to manipulate no longer exists. The open doors have closed. The soft heart they once bruised now beats with wisdom. They don't know how to talk to you anymore because your language has changed. You don't beg, you don't chase, you don't explain. You simply move forward without them. And that's what terrifies them most, not your anger, but your indifference. Not your fire, but your calm. They can't touch what they no longer recognize. Because you've become something they never imagined, unavailable. They waited for your weakness, but now they're witnessing your transformation, and it's burning them in silence. Your peace has become their punishment. Your growth, their grief. They can't undo what they did, and they can't reach who you are now. That is their collapse, not a scream, not a crash, but the slow, haunting realization that you survived them. That you escaped the trap with your soul intact and your purpose sharpened. So don't look back, don't soften, don't shrink to make them comfortable. You paid in silence, in sleepless nights, in invisible wounds, and now you owe them nothing. Your only task now is to live, loudly, freely, with eyes forward and a heart too full to be fooled again. Let your healing speak for itself. Let your return remind them. The one they tried to break has become the one they cannot reach. And, in that truth, in your quiet, glorious rise, lies their greatest downfall.